Alright, welcome back Midlifers, it's me Prashana. So I'm sure you saw the previous video where we talked about the Lomo Instant Wide Glass. For those of you who haven't watched it, maybe you want to watch that. We're not going to talk about the features of that model in particular. We're going to do more of a comparison video. I think many of you might be wondering whether the glass version is worth paying a premium over the non-glass version. So before we even start talking about image quality, let's talk about the cameras themselves. So size-wise, they're almost the same. The glass version, of course, has a larger lens footprint, and it does protrude a bit more further out compared to the non-glass version. When you talk about features, the glass one actually has the macro feature built into the glass element, so you don't have to change lenses. It also has a f22 mode that this non-glass version doesn't have. So if these are features you need, then of course it's a no-brainer. You can't really choose between either one of them. Accessory-wise, they do have different things that they come with. The glass version, it comes with, of course, the gels that you can place in front of your flash and a splitzer right here. The non-glass version, it comes with the gels as well and the splitzer, but it has two other things that it comes with. It comes with a close-up lens attachment and ultra-wide lens attachment. The funny thing is both of them have different size filter threads. So if you buy the glass version, you can't really attach one lens attachment from the previous model if you already own a previous model. The previous model also has a viewfinder that's honestly easier to use. So if you look through both viewfinders, you'll realize the non-glass version has a clearer viewfinder that's easier to use, that's interchangeable should you wish to use the different types of lens attachments. So without further ado, let's cover whether the glass is actually worth it. So we did some quick testing. I think Ian will play that right now. Alright, so control lighting, camera setup, we made everything parallel, checked everything. Just to make sure I don't introduce any camera shake, I'm going to use the external shutter release lens cap. So we're going to take our first shot right now. We're taking all the shots at 0.6 of a meter so that we can film the frame as much as we can. This shot was taken with the 0.6 being to the film plane, but we will see which is the most accurate, whether to the lens or to the film plane is better. So now we're going to take the shot with the other camera, the non-glass variant, and let's see what we get. Okay. So when we were using the macro function, we realized that there's no real guidance on where we should aim the distances from with respect to the camera, whether it should be to the glass element or whether it should be to the film plane. The film plane isn't really demarcated as well. So that's why we're going to do a test with the different distances, 0.6 to the front of the glass or plastic element and 0.6 to where we suppose the film plane is. We are estimating the film plane to be where the ejection slot is, so that's where we will have some basis to guess our distances accurately. It might not matter at 0.6 of a meter, but I guess if you're shooting like the 0.3 macro, it may make a big difference. Alright, so we don't really know where we should measure our distances from, whether it's from the film plane or from the front of the glass element. So for this series of shots, we're going to do it actually from the front of the glass element. When we're measuring from the front of the glass element, you'll notice there'll be a slight discrepancy in the composition, especially between the two cameras, because each of the cameras protrude their lens a bit differently. So this camera protrudes the lens a bit more further out, so you might notice that the image may appear a bit smaller, may actually give a false impression of sharpness. But later when we get the actual images, let's compare them and see if there's any appreciable difference. Alright, so I think you've seen the testing, so I'm going to go through the images in detail. When we actually look at the images, the glass lens is sharper. There's no arguing about it. Okay, but there are certain things we did notice, certain discrepancies when it came to actually the testing itself. So let's talk about the non-glass version. When we used the non-glass version, we did two tests, one with the shot taken when we measure the distance to the film plane versus one to the front of the plastic element. When we measure to the film plane, it is noticeably sharper compared to the front of the plastic element. So whenever you're using this camera, just make sure whenever you estimate distances, it is always to the back of the film plane. So as you would have seen from my previous video, you may have noticed that I did say that I preferred if the images were overexposed ever so slightly. So we did a comparison shot from the glass camera, when you overexpose it, it tends to be a bit too bright. When you expose it at 0 EV, it tends to be a bit too dark. So this is what I was mentioning in the previous video. If there was a half a stop overexposure, that would be ideal. But when we talk about image quality, we did notice something that was a little bit different. Whenever we took the image when we measured the distance to the front of the glass element, it was noticeably sharper than when we measured the distance back to the film plane. So when you're using this camera, you need to actually reverse what you're doing with this camera. Whenever using this camera, whenever you're estimating distances, especially close distances, you need to measure it to the front of the glass element as opposed to the film plane. We weren't really 100% sure because one of the footprints of the sharpness target is a bit smaller. We were wondering whether this could be caused by, compression of the image. So we did a macro image, and I think the proof is in the pudding. When we took the image from the front of the glass element, it looks way sharper when compared to one closer to the film plane. So whenever you're using this camera, just take note. Whenever you're measuring any distances, make sure you estimate from the front of the glass element if you want sharp images. All the images taken with the glass variant was noticeably sharper than that of the non-glass variant. Whether this is worth that $100 or so extra dollars you might end up paying for it, I don't know. The other thing is you may also want to consider is the accessories. Like when you do actually buy the accessories, it's a bit limited with this camera. Here you do get, of course, a close-up filter lens and an ultra-wide angle lens, which may actually add to the creative opportunities you may have. But if sharpness is truly what you want and money is no object, then I would actually highly recommend that you consider the Mint RF70. We actually did dabble in some sharpness target tests and it won both these cameras without questions asked. So if you want sharpness, this is the camera you need to choose. But if your choice is between these two cameras, then you really have to make a decision whether it's sharpness that you want or creative options that you want. Each camera has its own pros and cons. I think I've covered them in the previous video, so don't really have to go through them right now. But both of them suffer from a similar fatal flaw. If you want to use a tripod, you got to make sure your tripod plate is quite small for both cameras. If not, it's going to be very troublesome for you to actually change the pack of film once it's fully expanded. Because once you place a tripod plate on these cameras, it's hard to open the film door fully out and replace the pack. So that's something you've got to pay attention to. And if most of your photography is in a studio, you're going to have this mounted on a tripod, you either have to get very narrow, thin tripod plates, or if not, then you have to consider other cameras that can actually allow you to change packs easily even when this camera is mounted. Otherwise, mostly they have the same features, so I have no qualms about it. Even though this has the close-up lens built in, it's very hard to use. So I do wish that Lomo, they provide a strap to allow you to measure the distance a bit more accurately. The F22 mode, I guess it's useful if you're taking a lot of landscape shots. That mode doesn't really come with this camera. I can only imagine very select cases being useful for that. Other than that, I think both cameras, they perform similarly. The build quality on the glass variant is a lot better. If you pick up the camera, it feels a bit more hefty. When you turn the knob, it actually has definite stops at each zone focus. So you know you're locked into focus, and it feels very premium. It slides very smoothly. Whereas if you're using the non-glass version, it feels a bit cheap. There's no definite stops at each zone focus. So this is something you have to accept when you're buying, I wouldn't say an inferior camera, but probably a bit more affordable camera. It does come in cool colorways. I don't think the glass at this moment comes in any of these cool colorways with artist collaboration. So if you want something that's a little bit funky, matches your style, then glass is probably not an option you gotta pick. So that's the end of our comparison video. I hope this helps you decide on which camera to get. If you ask me, I probably would get the glass. I think it's worth paying the slight premium over the non-glass version. Ian, which one would you get? Okay, Ian would get the RF70. But okay, let's say RF70 is off the table. Of these two, which one do you prefer?
The cheaper one.
The cheaper one. Okay, so Ian goes with the cheaper one. I think because he is blinded by this, okay? If nothing's gonna match the sharpness of this camera itself, so he sees no value in getting this. I personally, not really a fan of using the Mint RF70, every time it ejects photos, it sounds like death. I'm sure Ian will play it in the video throughout. But yeah, so if it's me, I probably get it. I guess Ian probably would get the more affordable one. Which one would you guys pick? As in, you guys saw all the reviews that we did previously and the comparison today. Maybe you can share with us your thoughts why you would pick which camera. If you love this episode, of course, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode of Midlifers.